Good. I have done it.
All right, so we're now recording. I'm going to go back to sharing. Okay, so what I was saying is, so I'm going to try to keep this practical, and want to let you know that this is now I'm on my second electric vehicle. My first one you actually see right here. I'm going to move the camera down. So a few years ago, I saw Dr. Brandon Mitchell on campus with a little electric scooter like that, and I thought that was brilliant because now I could park on South Campus and then take my scooter and move around campus much faster. So that was my first experience. Now the second experience being with a real car, and so I was somewhat familiar with batteries and charging and things like that. So it came down to the fact that my oldest daughter turned 16 and she got her license, and so we needed a third vehicle, a third car. And so she wasn't going to get the new car. She was going to get one of the older cars, and we were going to get the new car. So she got the older car, and we were thinking about what to purchase. And so started looking around, and the first thing you realize as you do a little bit of research online is that there's a lot of these acronyms about the vehicles options. There's ICE, hybrid, PHEV, and EV. And what do all those mean? So we're all familiar with the first one, even though we may not know that it's called ICE. It's internal combustion engine, which is a little ironic, right? Which internal combustion, we call it ICE. There's nothing cold about it. And then what about the other ones? What do they mean? So a hybrid car has the internal combustion engine, or the ICE, plus a battery. So it charges the battery with the combustion engine and with regenerative braking. You usually get about 1 to 2 mile range on that battery. Then you have the PHEV, which is plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. Now you still have the internal combustion engine, but you have a battery that you can plug in. So the battery now is a little larger. So this is for people that will do a small amount of driving on most days and longer trip with some regularity. Because now you can get between 10 and 40 miles of range with that car, with that battery, again, depending on how much you spend. So the cost goes up with the larger the range of that battery. And then you have EV, which is the electric vehicle. This is complete reliance on the electric power. So the hybrids are either just plain hybrid with no plug-in capability, or one that you can plug in and you get a larger range, or you go to 100% plug-in. So to me, when I was at this point with, okay, I need to buy a new car, so why not buy a plug-in hybrid if I really want to have a battery? And with my previous car, so back in 2020, we had to replace another car. And I started looking into maybe getting, why not the plug-in hybrid version of this car that I was to buy? And I quickly came to the conclusion that it wasn't going to be worth it for me, because it has a combination of a fuel tank and the engine, and still from the internal combustion. Then you add on top of that a battery and a motor, which are going to make it heavier. So when you're running the engine, you have a heavier vehicle that you're trying to move. And so the battery pack is also expensive, and so there's an upcharge compared to the cost of the non-hybrid one, and that cost was around $10,000 more. So I was looking at two of the same model, one that was $10,000 more expensive to give me, for the one I was looking for, I would get 20 miles. So I thought that $10,000 for 20 miles of charge was not worth it. And then when I'm using the fuel tank and the normal engine, I'm also paying more because I have a heavier car. So plus, it was still going to have all the problems with the tailpipe emissions. And I had another vehicle already for the long trip, so I didn't need something for long trips. So for me, I decided not plug-in hybrid was not worth it. Now, fast forward to 2022, when we're getting to the point where my daughter needs a car, so I started looking, what about going 100% electric vehicle? So what is available out there? What options are there? So in the United States, as of 2023, we have a series of luxury brands that make EV exclusive. And here you have the Teslas, Rivian, Lucid, Polestar, and Fisker. Now, you probably have seen a lot of Teslas around, maybe a few Rivians. That you have a Rivian right there. The shape of those lights gives it away that it's a Rivian. And the reason why you see a few is because they make an SUV and a truck, which Tesla doesn't make. So if you want an SUV or a truck, then you go for a Rivian. If you want a luxury car, you want to spend more than $80,000. Lucid, you may have seen a few. They make sedans. Polestar is part of the Volvo brand. Again, I probably have seen one or two Polestars. I have never seen a Fisker out there in the wild, but they do exist. So we see a lot of Teslas, a few Rivians, very few Lucids and Polestars, very rare to see a Fisker. Then you've got luxury brands that make EV options. So Volvo, Mercedes, Audi, BMW, Porsche, Cadillac, they all have at least one or two electric vehicles. Now, what if I don't want to get a luxury vehicle? I want to pay a little less money. What's available in 2023? And I look for anything that would be around 30,000 or more. So we have Ford that makes a Mustang Mach-E, Mazda makes a model only in California, only sold in California. Hyundai has a couple of them, Chevy, Nissan has a couple of them, Subaru, Volkswagen, there's a Mini Cooper, Kia has a couple of models, and Toyota. And all these manufacturers are announcing more. So 2024, 2025, more models that will be available and coming out. So that's what I was looking for, more something in the consumer range, and based on what was available in 2022, even at fewer than 2023. So I narrowed down my choices to this 5. So and because they were all about in the same price range. So there was the Tesla Model 3, the Mustang Mach-E, the Mercedes EQB, the Volkswagen ID4, and the Ioniq. And this is how the process went. Didn't like the Ioniq because I thought it looked like a shoe. The Tesla, I hate Elon Musk, and just the thought of giving him any of my money, I couldn't do it. So I just quickly discarded that. Mercedes, my wife would not be seen on this planet driving a Mercedes, even if I paid her. So she said, that's not me. I just would hate to be seen driving a Mercedes. So that one also was cut off. So we narrowed down to then the Volkswagen and the Mustang. And we happened to like the Volkswagen better just by the way it looked. And they were very comparable in price range and everything. So narrowed down to those two, got on the wait list in April 2022 for the ID4. And it took a whole year for me to finally get that car because the availability back then, because of microchip, the semiconductor shortages, component shortages, it just took a long time to finally get it. And so that's the one that we decided to buy. So why did we choose that one? Well, the range was pretty good, 255 miles on a charge. And then they made the transition so easy, removing all those anxieties, because they started offering 3 years of free charging on public charging, a vast charging network, a tax rebate. It was assembled in the United States, so it was cutting down on the cost of transportation emissions associated with all that. So that was also a little appealing. It came with a warranty on the battery for 100,000 miles. I'm thinking this is the most expensive component, and they give me an 8-year warranty on the battery. So all of these gave me a little bit of a peace of mind. Also, on top of that, I thought, what if my battery dies and I'm in the highway and what do I do with it? 3 years of free towing to the nearest charging station if that was to happen. So I really thought, okay, I think that I can maybe make the transition and feel like I can have some peace of mind that if something goes wrong, I'm going to be covered. And plus, I started doing the math and the calculation that I probably will be saving a lot of money over 5 years of ownership, and I'll get to that. So and when you look at the window sticker, it does say where the components come from. In this case, 69% from Canada and the US, 16% from Mexico. So most of the components were coming from North America. Was assembled in the United States, or transportation costs. So all of that also I thought was somewhat appealing because of the overall, I thought it'd be good to see if I can cut down on all the carbon emission associated with making, assembling, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, give me 1 second. So what to look for if looking for an electric vehicle? In terms of the range, what's good and what's bad. Anything with more than 300 miles on a full battery charge is considered exceptional. And there are some out there that will offer 350 miles or maybe even 400 miles. And these are pretty good. These are not, the estimate that you get downhill, wind tunnel, with somebody even pushing behind. I mean, this is actually realistic. This is, I found that the same vehicles in Europe are very unrealistic advertising. Here in the States, the EPA estimated ranges are actually pretty accurate. They're on realistic usage. So when they tell you 250 miles EPA, you can trust that. 200 plus miles is good. Less than 200, 100, 200, I think that would be poor. But again, the cost of the car is going to depend on the range. So it also depends on the budget and the personal needs, which we'll get to. Now, what determines the range is not necessarily just the capacity of the battery. I mean, the capacity of the battery is important, and it will determine how long it takes to charge. But in reality, what gives you the range is how heavy it is, what's its size, how many horsepower it has, the aerodynamics. So I think it's better to look at the actual range than not at the battery capacity, because it's going to change, it's going to vary. Two cars with the same capacity may not have the same range just because of how efficiently they drive based on the aerodynamic and their weight. And the other thing I think is worth looking into is getting a warranty on that battery. So manufacturers that can tell you, I'm going to offer a solid warranty for 8 years or 100,000 miles on that battery because it's going to be the most expensive component in the car. That means that they're standing behind it, and you can have the peace of mind. On the battery capacity, they put their gross versus net. Also, it's an important thing because, and I noticed also that in Europe, manufacturers advertise the gross. Here, they advertise the net. So batteries, let's say that a battery takes 100 kilowatts, but the manufacturer will allow you to only charge 80 kilowatts. So that's the net. And why do they do that? Because the less we charge, the longer the battery will last. So they don't let you go from complete discharge to complete charge. They keep a buffer, and that buffer maintains the life of the battery for longer. So what you're looking in, really, the only component of the battery that they can charge is the net, never the gross. And then the bigger the buffer, then the bigger the recommendation is to how much you should also charge it, which is going to be a little less than the net. And so, for example, they will recommend, a Tesla recommends to always charge it to about 90% for regular driving. If you have a long trip, go to 100%. Volkswagen says charge it to 80%, and then for a long trip, you can go to 100. So on a day-to-day basis, keeping it between 20 and 80 is ideal. So that kind of shrinks your range a little bit when considering that. The next thing that can be confusing is that when you look at what they are advertising for the efficiency, is that we're so used to miles per gallon, right? You think about a good car is a good efficiency, maybe 25 miles per gallon, of which will be 22 city, 28 highway, right? I think that's a pretty good efficiency. So every gallon of gas, I'm going 25 miles. But on the electric vehicle, I'm not putting gasoline, I'm charging a battery. So how can I compare that? What they call that miles per gallon equivalent. It's the same reason why we still use horsepower for how powerful is the car, right? There's no more horses in the car, but we were used to the horse, and so we started thinking about how much horsepower does this car have, and we still use it today. So it's possible that we still use miles per gallon, even the day that we have no more gasoline sold, but we'll still think about what's the miles per gallon. So they call it miles per gallon equivalent. And so that's based on if this, in terms of how many kilowatts of energy I get from a gallon of gasoline and how many kilowatts of electricity, what would that convert to? So a typical electric vehicle will have 100 miles per gallon. So that means that if this was to use gasoline, I could go for 100 miles for every gallon. And the other thing to notice is that it's better in the city than the highway. So it's the opposite than the internal combustion engines. So they're more efficient when driving in the city, where we spend most of the time, than when we're on a highway. Mostly because when the car is idling, it's using zero power. There's no ignition on and off. Some newer cars have the on and off when you stop at a light. There's none of that. It's just idling is doing nothing. Moving slowly takes much less energy than going fast on a highway. So they're actually better in the city. So the one I bought advertised 99 miles per gallon, 104 city, 93. So you see, it's pretty typical for this to be about around 100 miles per gallon. So far, what we said, we should consider the range. So how many miles I get on this full charge? What is the efficiency? And we can still look at, in terms of miles per gallon. So a range of 200 plus is good. efficiency of 100 miles per gallon equivalent is also good. The other thing is, so now what are my personal needs? How much do I travel every day, and will that range work for me? So most people drive less than 50 miles a day. So even 100 miles will be fine, but you have those long trips to consider here and there as well. So you need to think about that. Then the next thing to consider is, where am I going to charge it? Do I rent or own my house? Because the charging at home is really where most of the charging is going to happen. The charging station is for the long trips. And if you rent a house and the homeowner is not willing to let you install a charger, that is not going to work out. Unless the owner is willing to do the upgrades, or maybe the house already has that upgrade. So can you install a charging station in your garage? Would be, or outside of your house, at least. The other thing is, what type of charge connector should I use? Because that could also be confusing. There are actually 3 types of connectors. Now, the reassuring thing is that the first one, the CHAdeMO, is very rare now. I think it was the very, very few chargers that came out at that CHAdeMO version, and it's almost extinct. So don't need to worry about that. What really we have now is the CCS versus Tesla. So Tesla is their own proprietary plug, which you actually see down here. And it's only for Tesla cars. It just doesn't fit. It's like trying to put a European plug in an American plug, right? Or vice versa. It could work if you just had a different shape. And then the CCS has this shape instead. And so everybody else is using the CCS. And the interesting thing is that Tesla calls it the North American charging standard. So they're trying to also say, this is the standard that we created. But what they're doing now, they're opening their network. So what that means, they're providing an adapter by their charging stations. So it's becoming now better that you can use the CCS at a Tesla, because you can just put an adapter to it and charge with the adapter. And then the battery warranty, I mentioned earlier. I'm sorry, I think I went too fast. Yeah, it's important to see, is there a battery warranty? So do I have a garage? Can I charge in my garage? Can I charge at home? Can I install a charger? Look for at least CCS. An older car with a CHAdeMO, there would be a used car, you're gonna have some problems. Chargers. So this can also be a little confusing. There are 3 levels of charging. They're called level 1, level 2, and level 3. So level 1 is your standard outlet that we all have in our homes already. So you can see right there, you see a standard outlet. And if you were to plug your car to the standard outlet, you would get 1 to 2 kilowatts, which means 2 to 5 miles per hour, which means your car will take 2 to 5 days to fully charge. So you can kind of see that this is just not worth it. It takes too long. I can only use my car every 5 days. So that's for emergencies. The level 2 charger is when you buy and install an actual charger. So what this entails is, if you have an electric range, an electric dryer, that's the equivalent of doing that. Installing a plug in your garage that is as big as those round range or electric dryer plugs. It takes 240 volts. So now you get up to 11 kilowatts, which will give you a full charge in 7.5 hours. So this means if your battery is completely drained, in 7.5 hours is charged. But you typically don't drain it to 0. So in my house, in 3.5 hours, I'm up to 80%, which is where we keep it. So it's never taking me more than 3.5 hours. And it's really convenient because just at night, I plug it in after the last drive of the day. When we need to, we plug it in, and by 1 a.m. at the latest, it's already charged. And then the level 3 is the DC fast charging. So those are the charging stations where you actually drive your car up, and you can get up to 350 kilowatts. That means that you can get a full charge from 0 to 100 in 45 minutes. But typically, you won't be at 0. So I've never gone more than 30 minutes to get a full charge. And you really see that, like, you're sitting there and you see the percentage going up pretty quickly. It's pretty impressive how quickly they can charge that large battery. So again, so level 1 is a standard outlet. Level 2, you have to have somebody install, or I did it myself, it's not that hard. You install a charger that is specific for the car. And level 3 is when you take it to the charging station. So most people will want to install the level 2 charging, which doesn't have to be inside the garage. I mean, look at these people, how happy they are with their charger outside, right? So it works outside, it's waterproof. I have a garage, so I put mine in the garage. And the car doesn't have to be outside. It can stay inside. It doesn't overheat when it's charging. But it can be outside if you don't have a garage. So then probably the next question you have is, how much does it cost to charge it at home? So at home, I pay $0.094, so 9.4 cents per kilowatt. So that means that if my battery was completely drained and it would go to 100%, it would cost me $7.2 to charge that car. Typically, because I keep it between 20 and 80, it costs me $4.3 per charge. And so that means that every week I'm paying about $21 for a full tank of gas. Can you imagine having a car that you only pay $20 to fill the tank? So my other car, we paid on average between $75 and $90 a week to fill that tank. So I went from 75 to 90, depending on the cost of gas, to $21, $22 roughly per week that I'm paying for gas. Let's say that I'm going to a charging station. Now they charge me a little more. They charge me 36 cents per kilowatt. So this would cost me $27 for a full charge, or 17 between 20 and 80, which would be your tip. Again, you're not going to go there with a zero battery because it would be, you're really pushing your luck, right? So most likely you're going to have at least 20%. So to take it to 80, it costs you $17. So that would be $83 a week. So you see, that's why the home charger is the way to go. Because in the end, if I always take it to the station, I'm paying just as much as I was paying for gas, about $83 a week. So, but at home, I'm saving so much money because there's not the upcharge. They're trying to recover the cost of creating that station and all of that, right? But these are great for when you're traveling because you're still saving money and you're charging your car, right? So the way to go is to install it at home. So why is it so good? Then why do you save so much money for an electric car versus the ICE or the internal combustion? Well, so here's the math that I did to convince me it's time for me to go for the electric vehicle, because I was paying about $85 a week for our tank because we drive my girls go to dance every night and we have so much driving. So I did the math and I said it would cost me 80 a week times 52 weeks times 5 years, $20,000 of gas on top of the cost of the car. With this vehicle, I'm paying $21 a week times 52 weeks times 5 years. I'm paying $5,000 over 5 years in electricity to charge the car. So I'm saving $15,000 for operating this car over 5 years. So that made sense to me now. The other thing is, why is it so good? Because the efficiency of using electricity is so much more than using gasoline. We get 95% of the energy going towards driving, versus with internal combustion, 80% of that energy goes to heat because you have a fire inside your car, right? No wonder you have the big fan and the big cooler radiator to cool it. And you're only using 20% of that energy to drive it. So it takes 76 kilowatts, again, the miles per gallon equivalent, the conversion of how many kilowatts are in 1 liter of gasoline is 9.5. versus only 15 kilowatts to move that car. So it's just much more efficient. How many what's the charging network like when I'm not at home? Well, this shows us that the number of charging stations is increasing, and it has been increasing, and is in this a big investment put into the network. Even if it was to stop where it is, I'd be okay because, like I said, I charge it at home. These are when I'm on a long trip that I need to recharge it because the range is extended. But other than that, I charge it at home, so I don't really care that much that it's going to improve. I'd like to see it, but in my case, I'm fine and I'm saving money by charging it at home. So the driving experience has been also, I mean, I guess I could say it's kind of life-changing. And this is why, because ever since I was a kid, cars always work the same way. A motor with cylinders, carburetors were maybe changed with electronic injection, but in the concept of how the car worked, transmission, engine, moving the axle, was always the same. All we were adding were features. I remember when power windows came out, when airbags came out, those are the big features that the manufacturer would tell you, buy the car because it's got the airbag, it's got the power windows, it's got a remote to lock it. Now we can do remote start. But now, when I'm driving this car, all that is completely changed. You have a quiet, smooth. There's no transmission. It's super smooth. It's quiet. You feel an immediate response. When I push the accelerator, before you would, let's say that you're trying to pass a car, you're just stepping on it. A few things happen. You feel the engine revving, the car down gears, and then you feel like it's going to give you that boost. With this, the moment I go down, it's just responding immediately. If I'm not careful, I'm going to rear end the guy in front if I don't start turning. So there's the immediate, you feel like you have a connection with the car that before quite didn't exist. So you get the instant torque. And then the other thing that has changed is you can do the one pedal driving. I don't have to constantly switch from accelerator to brake. When I let go of the accelerator, it starts braking for me already. And I only use the brake when I need to come to a full stop. So, and that's how it recovers energy. It engages the motor to slow down the car. It recovers energy while I'm braking. So you can actually relax a lot more and only use the one pedal to drive, accelerate, accelerate, brake. And then when I come to a full stop, I brake. So when I drive the other car, I'm like, oh, I have to move my foot to brake. I get a little annoyed that I have to move my leg when I got so used to not moving my leg. It's kind of like going from driving with a clutch to an automatic, right? Where you have to always use the clutch to switch gears. Now you don't even actually almost have to use the brake anymore. So it's a little exciting. It's like a change, and you can tell that technology has finally really changed from the way cars have been for decades. So what about now the long trip anxiety? If I'm going on a long trip, will I be stuck there and will I need to get a kite to try and to get a lightning to hit it to charge my car? Well, there's a lot of help here. The built-in navigation system, if I type in where I want to go, is going to calculate based on the distance, how much battery I have, my route, and tell me if I need to stop somewhere or not for recharging. So we'll do it automatically. Let's say you don't like, also, if you get below 20%, you start getting all sorts of warnings. They start telling you, okay, your battery now is at 20%. Do you want me to navigate you to the closest charging station? And if you hit yes, it will just route you there. If you don't like using internal navigation systems, you use Google or Apple Maps. You just can select there what type of vehicle you have. You tell it I have EV, and then it will, again, also calculate your trip and find you charging stations within your route. So it's really easy to find the charging stations along your route. There's third-party apps also that will help you, find charging station and estimate your trip. So really, this has not been a problem. So when I've tried it, our first long trip with this car was we needed to go to New York. We wanted to go watch a show in New York. So I live in Chadds Ford, and I put it on Google Maps, and it told me that it would take 127 miles. So my range is 250. So that means that I would have made it there and back with 1% battery. And I'm like, I don't want to risk it. So how about I charge somewhere before I come back? So that's all I did. We drove all the way to New York, parked it, drove back, and stopped at this charging station, which is right along the route. And we thought, hey, we're going to have dinner anyways. And these charging stations are usually by a Walmart or a Wawa. So we thought, hey, why don't we go to Wawa while it's charging? Well, it turns out we didn't have time. It started charging so fast that we figured by the time we leave and we go to Wawa order and come back, it'll be totally charged. And they charge you idling fees if you stay there. You can't leave your car more than 10 minutes after it's done charging, because you don't want to bog down this charging station for the next person. So we actually couldn't, it was so fast that we ended up doing a drive-through after it was charged. So I was actually pretty impressed when I quickly charged that battery. My next trip, I needed to go visit my brother down to Virginia. This was a 4.5 hour drive. So 280 miles just to get there. Again, I have 255 miles range from 100%. So I thought, well, let's see, I'm gonna plug in that I need a charging station. It told me there's a charging station right along the route in DC. So we drove all the way to DC, stopped there for lunch. It was in a parking garage next to a mall, charged it up, and then went on to see my brother. He doesn't have a charger at home. So then I thought, well, I have to come back to charge before coming back. And he has a charging station 10 minutes from his house. So the next day we were there, we had to go down to Richmond. So I looked it up. So I stopped to charge right on north of Stuart Draft right there. It was 117 miles to go to Richmond, drove to Richmond, did a thing for the day, And so that was great. And the great thing about all this is that because Volkswagen gives you 3 years of free charging at the charging stations, this trip was free. I would have refueled my car multiple times, my internal combustion car, if I went there, but because I have 3 years of free charging at charging station, ended up being a free trip. So I was actually happy to stop for 30 minutes here and there to recharge it. So the next thing I want to touch on is the environmental impacts. So the argument against EVs is, well, it still takes, actually, it's more expensive to make these batteries, and it takes a lot of carbon emissions. So they're generally energy intensive in the manufacturing. There's emissions from manufacturing the battery, from mining and processing the raw materials. Making the electricity also produces just as much carbon emissions than burning gas in an engine. So the detractors will say you're not really saving the planet at all, by buying an electric vehicle. Now, the claim on the battery production in principle is true. It does take it has a lot of carbon emissions in making the battery. But the second, arguments, the ones on the making electricity and then all that while using the car, they're just wrong, because even when charged from a coal-dominated electrical grid, like China and India, the efficiency of the car is so much better than using gasoline. And so then you consider that the grid is only going to become cleaner over time, then we're only looking at improvements in the future. So we have to really look at the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions to really understand are we saving the planet or not. So we have vehicle production, fuel production, and vehicle operation. They all have to be taken into account if you want to know what is your environmental impact. And this is the data that shows the difference. So when you consider the whole lifetime of a vehicle, this graph is comparing Europe to the United States when using electric vehicles, and then you have the conventional gasoline here. So when we look at the gray part here is just making the vehicle, the emissions in making a vehicle. And for the EVs, we're adding the yellow part, which is the battery. So when you combine the gray and the yellow, yes, you are above the gray of just making the gasoline vehicle. But then when you have fuel production and fuel combustion emissions, look at the difference. So in the States, where we have not such a green grid for making electricity as other countries, we're still decreasing our emissions by almost 50%. You're cutting your emissions in half over the usage of your car. And maybe one day will be as green as France, where they have a much greener, they use coal and oil much less than we do to make electricity. So there you're talking about a 78% decrease. So just imagine if we could cut only in half all the emissions of all the cars that are out there, what great impact it would have on the environment. So again, that's because of you're getting 100 miles per gallon when you're driving this, and because over time the grid will get cleaner and cleaner. So if you compare driving 93,000 miles or 150,000 kilometers and the emissions when using the internal combustion engine versus the electric vehicle, you can see that the difference is substantial. Yes, battery and car are maybe more carbon, there's more of a carbon footprint when doing that. But then when you consider the usage, which is where most of the emissions are going to occur, there's just no doubt that it's better for the environment. So just to end, these are the typical questions that people ask me. How often do you charge? So in the summer, we used to charge once or twice a week at the most. Now that we started school, I have 3 kids, my wife has a job that is 30 minutes away, we actually end up charging every day because we drive 100 miles a day on that car. By her going to work and back, and then my daughters, they take 5 dance classes each, and I'm not joking. So we're constantly going back and forth to the dance studio. So yesterday I drove 103 miles on her car. So between her and me, so it makes sense to charge it every day and keep it back to 80, bring it back to 80%. So we have plenty juice. But again, it's not a problem because we're only going to 80%. We're way far from that, the gross. So there's plenty buffer. So the life of the battery is not going to be depleting. Is the insurance more expensive? Not at all. When we insure it, it's based on the cost of the car. So the more you pay for the car, the more your insurance will go up. But having the battery did not increase the cost. What if you get stranded with no battery? Again, it'd be hard because I would have to ignore all the warnings and tell it not to navigate me to a charging station. Plus, I have 3 years of free towing to a charging station, so I don't worry about that at all. Does it need oil changes? Not at all. So you're saving on maintenance. There's no oil changes, no emission inspections. You're only paying for safety inspections. Does it have a radiator? It actually still does. Usually the key signature of an electric car is the grill is missing that grill that holds in the front. In reality, they do have it. It's just a little lower. It's harder to see because it does have a radiator. It's just a smaller one because it needs to cool off the battery during usage and charging. Just like your phone, it warms up when you're charging it. So it has a cooling system that can step in if it needs to cool off the battery. So there's a small radiator there. Will the resale value decrease as the battery deteriorates? This article that came out in 2019, published in the Journal of Electrochemical Society, states that lithium-ion batteries used in the new EVs can power a vehicle for more than 1.6 million kilometers or 1 million miles. So I don't think I'll get close to 1 million miles with this car. And so I'm not worried about this value decreasing over time. Teslas have been around for more than 10 years and their value has not been decreasing worse than other cars when they're old. So just to summarize things, the higher the range, the better. The recommended usage of the battery may be less than the range. So on a daily basis, you have to realize that you may only be charging up to 80%. That's why my recommendation is go for with the largest battery available, because on a day-to-day basis, you're only charging to about 80% of that. You can charge as often as you wish. It's not going to hurt the battery if you keep it within the parameters that the manufacturer tells you to keep it. In my car, it's between 20 and 80. So we don't go below 20. We keep it at 80. When I go on the long trips, I charge it to 100%. The computer can do calculations, and you can also tell it, every morning I get up at 7, so have the car ready for me at 7 a.m. It will warm it up or cool it off and have it ready charged at 7 a.m. So I can actually if let's say I park outside and I want it warmed up, it will warm it up using the electricity plugged in and not the battery. So it's ready for me at 7 a.m., warmed up and ready to go and charge the way I want it. Definitely install a level 2 charger because that's the way to save money. The DC ones are more expensive, so the level 2 is where you save your money. Charging is easy, and the convenience from home is what is priceless. The fact that I don't remember the last time I went to a gas station, and I love it, just because I can charge it at home. Batteries don't deplete when they're sitting there unused. Remember, the average person drives less than 50 miles a day, so again, the range anxiety is only for the long trips, but it's easy to calculate. And this is the last point, my favorite one. I think right now is the best time to buy an EV because they're not taxed on the road usage. The reason why gasoline is more expensive from state to state is because there's the road usage tax that is charged on the cost of gasoline. What does that mean? The more gasoline I use, it means that I'm driving the car more and I'm putting wear and tear on the roads, right? So there's a tax that the state recovers that uses for maintenance of the roads that is charged on the gasoline. I'm charging at home and nobody is charging me the tax for using my car. So right now I'm using the roads for free. At some point, they'll catch on to that and realize there's enough electric vehicles out there that we're not getting enough revenue from those taxes. And they would have to enforce a way of having a separate meter for charging your vehicle that can tax you for the road usage. It doesn't exist yet. So right now you're essentially driving that car tax-free on the road usage. So right now it's the most convenient time of owning one. And you can cut your CO2 emissions in half. Technology is improving. Now we're even getting wireless chargers that are being developed. We don't even have to plug it in. You can drive over a mat, just like your phone has the magnet, not even a magnet. You can actually drive it in and it will charge it just by sitting there. And maybe one day we'll see more of this. Instead of parking meters, we'll have a meter with a built-in charging station. So if you don't own a house, you can charge, on the street. Or maybe charging stations where they're using solar energy to power the batteries to charge your car. So we're even going greener than we had. So maybe, you know, that's hopefully the direction things are going to be going in the future. So that's all I have. Be happy to take questions if there are any. If not, I can see if there are a couple of questions in the chat here. So recycling of the batteries, right? The industry is developing. So the comment says no one may be able to see an almost circular system here. Fossil fuel powered is always needing fossil inputs. Yeah. So the other thing I consider is this. Yeah, my battery is going to be at some point need to be taken to some landfill or somehow recycled. My thought is this: my combustion engine car is putting its emission in the environment everywhere. So good luck now capturing all these particles one at a time and containing them. My battery, for as polluting as it can be, it's contained. It's a battery. So if you can develop a technology to recycle it or reuse it, it's contained. It's not, you know, broken up and dispersed in the environment. And good luck recapturing all the carbon that I put in the environment over the years of usage. So I think it's, you know, I think it's a problem that can be solved if we put our minds to it, and we don't just, no, there's so many things in the past that we just decided not to ignore and just put them under the carpet and then wait until they become a problem. I think that now we can tackle this before it becomes the problem. Other questions? Yes, we have a question here, and I'll repeat it for the people.
About like the charging stations, right? Because you see them, and I'm assuming you have to use a credit card, but it says Tesla, you don't have a Tesla, can you use that? But you're saying that it's free. If it's free, you pay and get reimbursed, or if your card is your own stations that recognize that card, like how does it work? Yeah,
that's true. It can be confusing with the charging station. She's asking, you know, if it's Tesla, non-Tesla, which ones are free, how do you get reimbursed? So Volkswagen has their own brand of charging station. They're called Electrify America. So on my app, I just tell it, find me only Electrify America station, and it will only show me those. So I personally drive to those because it's free for me. I show up there, I plug it in, and then I go on my phone, I open the app, and I just, you know, there's a number for, you know, number 2. I'm on pump number 2. I select 2, start charge. And then it starts charging. And then it shows me what I would have been charged, and it says 0 at the end. So because I go to Electrify America, I get 0 for 3 years. If I went anywhere else, then you could put a credit card or use an app if you have it, and then they would charge me the rate per kilowatt that I use. I wouldn't go to a Tesla unless I guarantee that the charging Tesla has the adapter for my car. So for now, I've been avoiding Tesla's charging station because I don't know if it can charge my car. I only go to the Electrify America brand. It's like saying only show me Shell gas stations, only show me, maybe because you're doing points, right? You could do that. Same thing you do with a charging station. Electrify America is the second largest network after Tesla. So there's quite a few of them around. So it's not been that hard to find them for me when I go on these long trips. But I did go on a trip on the Poconos, and I took my other car because I was not going to be able to charge in the Poconos on the mountains. So in that case, that was the one long trip that we took recently. But also, the other car is larger. We have 3 kids, so we wouldn't have been able to even fit the luggage in the Volkswagen, so it wouldn't have worked out.
So there may be a question from Professor Blanco. She's shaking her head now.
Okay, no, she just said
well,
great.
I just unmuted because you were acknowledging my comment in the chat. Yes. Do you know how much those? Oh,
like I'm thinking catastrophic failure of the battery is probably not super likely, but it will over time. Like you said, first you get 100 miles, then you're getting 80, then you're getting 50. When does that kick in? So
they say that the warranty states that you are going to be getting 80% of your battery over 8 years. If it tests less than, if you have less than 80% capacity after 8 years, they'll give you a new battery. So yeah. So it's not necessarily just for a catastrophic. It's like if it's depleting, so it has multiple cells, and when you take it in for maintenance, they see if all the cells are working. They'll tell you, you know what, one of the cells is faulty. We'll have to replace it. So things like that is totally covered for the battery.
Lorenzo, we're at 12:50, and we normally pause at this point because some people have to run to get to another class starting at 1 o'clock. People may have to log off of the Zoom. But if you're available for a few more minutes to answer some more questions, we can keep going. if you do have to leave right now, thank you for joining us. Let's say a quick thank you now to Professor Cena.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And please join us next week when chemistry professor Danielle Shurgon will be making a presentation. Any other questions?
Okay, so another question here.
So, I know you mentioned this briefly, but I was wondering if you could say more. My partner and I will never be able to afford a house, so apartment living seems like it. And I'm wondering if you could say a little more about what the options were for charging. I mean, if there are any,
Yeah.
just the gas station and charging station.
Yes, so the question is, if you're not able to afford a house and you live in an apartment, what are your options for charging? Unfortunately, not that many right now. So in Europe, things are getting better. They're a little ahead. There's way more options for cars, and you see more of these instances where you'll have charging stations on the street available. So the hope would be that some of the owners, when they're renting, they're actually putting forward, just like right now, they may tell you, this house provides, a washer and a dryer. They could say, we're actually providing EV charging. So that could be an incentive for you to say, I want to rent that house because it has built-in EV charging. So hopefully we'll be, or maybe going to the owner and say, would you let us install it? It cost me $1,000 to install the charger, just for parts. And then an electrician will charge you on top of that. So in my case, to buy the charger was $500. Then the conduit, the plug, the breaker, all that, add up to about $1,000 in materials. An electrician, it will probably double or triple that, depending on what you do. So it's not cheap to go that way. But if they're willing, they can use it as incentive for attracting renters by adding that. And hopefully then eventually you'll have more of this street parking. It will always cost a little more. The charging stations, at work, I know people that at work they have charging. Just it'd be great if on campus we could see that more, right? There's like a bunch of charging stations. They don't have to be the level 3, they could be the level 2. I'm here for 8 hours. So if my spot is a charger, great. Then I have my car always, I would never need to charge it ever. I would have enough for the weekend, and every day I can go home with an 80% charge battery just by coming to work. So there are places of employment that will offer that. Hopefully then we'll see more on the street, but now you're probably going to be charged more than you would at home. So the hope is that I think that the more EVs that are around, the more changes we'll see. Anything else?
I'll just add, with my family and I were looking for a new car, a car to replace an old car. In 2018, we ended up buying a used EV. It has a limited range of about 70 miles, but that can get me to and from work most days.
Right.
We don't use it for those long distance.
No, you have an alternative for long distance trips.
We have an older Honda Civic that we can use when we need to do that. And it's proved to be fairly economical because the price was quite low to buy a vehicle coming off of a lease. And as you said, the operating costs, because we are able to charge at home, are very low. And it's worked for us, but there are some logistical challenges as people transition to a different way of fueling the vehicles that they do.
Yeah, so now this is my wife's car, and I'm very jealous. I actually volunteered to go pick up our girls because I just love driving that car. It's just so different, and I just like it that I don't mind going pick up the girls from dance in the evening because it's like I get a chance to drive her car. And then I also thought, I was talking to another friend, was saying, yeah, they are more expensive. And let's say that you were to pay $50,000 for the electric vehicle. There are a lot of non-electric $50,000 cars. And to buy those cars, then you pay an extra $20,000 for driving it for 5 years. So even if you did pay $50,000 for the electric, you're going to save another 20 over 5 years. So you're comparing 70,000 over 5 years versus just 50 plus the 5 that I calculated for charging it every day because we drive it a lot. And the average person probably wouldn't even drive that 100 miles like we do. So yeah.
Okay,
Oh, well, thanks.
Thank you very much.